you struggled with is one of the clearest examples of this. That is, you say you're a rationalist. Why should you believe these things? And we ask you, why should we tonight in this room, all of us, be using laws of logic to answer questions and to evaluate responses? In your worldview, you can't give us a reason why, on purely naturalistic presuppositions, why these laws of logic exist and why we all recognize that we need to be utilizing them. And so that's the fundamental thing. Without the Christian God, you're just left going, well, yes, I am evolved. I'm just evolved, but I have purpose, and you just have to believe it. And we're asking why. And then I also have multiple times pointed out that as far as the Christian God is concerned, we have an empty tomb in Jerusalem. And so there is a fundamental claim that Jesus made as to who he was, and then proved that by his resurrection. And that then becomes the foundation of being able to say it's the Christian God that has the right to define these things for us because he's the one who made us.
And if I could answer, Dr. Chatterjee, you bring up the claim of Christians have dogma, Christians brainwash. And I would hope that it'd be clear to every rational and thinking person that everybody on this stage has dogma, doctrine, and we all teach. The public schools have dogma. They have doctrine. Your system has dogma and doctrine. It's not the question of whether we have dogma and doctrine, it's which dogma and doctrine is actually in accordance with the truth. You ask the question of why would we brainwash our children in the Christian faith? Why would we teach them things like empathy, love? Why wouldn't we talk about things like beauty, truth, goodness, knowledge? And I'm going to say, Dr. Chatterjee, because apart from the biblical worldview, all of those concepts have absolutely no meaning. Without the Christian worldview, there is no true love. Without the Christian worldview, there is no beauty. Without the Christian worldview, there is no foundation that satisfies the preconditions of intelligibility necessary for science, for logic, for ethics, for truth, for beauty, for goodness. And so we talk to our kids about these things because they're the truth. And so I know you use the word brainwashing, but it really comes down to we're all teaching who's teaching something that's in accordance with the truth.
Can I just respond? Look, why do you believe that love, empathy, good ideas, meaning in life, all those things, you have to be only a Christian to have that? What about the whole big world? Christianity is just one tiny part of it. But if you believe that way, you have to give some reason. You're simply repeating yourself, going in a cycle. I don't understand
that. I appreciate that. Now, let me try to make it clear. I did have it in my opening statement, so perhaps you missed some of it. But what I said in the opening statement is I provided a justification or a philosophical warrant for the claims that I was making, and I based them upon the triune God of Holy Scripture. He's revealed himself in nature, through prophets and apostles, and ultimately through the incarnation of Jesus Christ in history. In other words, Dr. Chatterjee, the Christian claim is that God has spoken. And the claim of Scripture is that apart from the Christian God, if you reject him, you become a fool intellectually, morally. And apart from the Christian God, you can't prove anything. I'll give you one example, Dr. Chatterjee, so you can see what I'm aiming at. When we challenged you to provide a foundation or justification for why we should be rational given your worldview, you haven't given one, and you can't give one in your worldview because your worldview is a naturalistic worldview where all you have is matter and motion. But laws of logic are immaterial, invariant, universal laws and truths that we're all supposed to be holding on to. The Christian worldview can provide a foundation for those concepts and those truths, but your system cannot. So reject Jesus and reject the laws of logic. Reject Jesus and reject science, the uniformity in nature, the principle of induction. Reject Jesus and say things like, it might be okay to eat your neighbor rather than love them.
Well, I have the highest respect for Christianity, Christian God, but I don't like people being close-minded. If you believe that way, I would like to see some reason for that, because there is a bigger world outside of Christianity. I didn't see any reason why we have to confine ourselves to Christianity. Give some reasons. In fact, perhaps I can give you better reasons as to why Christianity is such a wonderful religion than what we have been hearing from you. Let me cite one thing, okay?
Well, if I can answer that, Dr. Chatterjee, when you say there's so much more outside of Christianity, If Jesus was who he claimed to be, then what could be outside of Christianity? He's described in Colossians chapter 1, for by him were all things made, whether in heaven and earth, visible, invisible, principalities, powers, dominions, or authorities, all things created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and him all things hold together, they consist. So if Jesus is actually the incarnate creator, what could be outside of him? That's the whole point. We're saying our creator has entered into his creation and said, this is how you live. This is how you have life. So you have to say Jesus had to have been wrong. You literally have to make an epistemic claim that Jesus was not who he claimed to be to say there's something outside of the realm of his authority.
I have a follow-up question. How do we know what Jesus said?
We have the records given to us, not only, well, let me just point out, I did hear a little misunderstanding. When we talk about the Christian faith, we're talking about everything from the beginning of Revelation with Moses all the way through the New Testament. So we're not just talking about the New Testament, but how do we know what Jesus wrote? Well, you ought to see my debate with Bart Ehrman on that subject. Have you seen that debate?
Did Jesus write anything?
No, he did not write anything as far as a book that's been passed down to us, but his disciples provided to us those documents.
Yeah, no, we have multiple traditions about what Jesus said and did. I'm asking you, what are your criteria for evaluating them?
When you say multiple traditions, please define what you mean.
The synoptics versus John, so we have the sayings of Jesus. I'm going to bracket a question, which is, what does Christianity have to do with the debate? Is God necessary for ethics? But I'll just put that aside since this is the conversation we're having. So we have Jesus's words and actions in Mark, and then we have them in Matthew, and then we have them in Luke, and then we have them in John. So how do you, I'm genuinely curious, how do you evaluate so did Jesus say every single thing that's mentioned in all of the Gospels?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
How
and
do you know?
in fact, for example, I taught through the Synoptic Gospels for 9 years in the original languages, and there is no conflict between the Synoptic tradition and the Johannine tradition as to who Jesus was, what he taught. For example, just one glowing example, since you said you studied under Bart Ehrman, he likes to try to introduce a contradiction between the Synoptic Gospels and John as to the day of the crucifixion. That is easily demonstrated to be completely false. He does not understand that the Passover was a week-long feast. And just on a basic level, Dr. Ehrman makes numerous basic errors on those levels, but he doesn't allow anybody to correct him because, well, he's Bart Ehrman.
Yeah, which textual tradition do you feel is the most accurate? I'm just curious.
When you say textual tradition, even Dr. Ehrman has admitted we know what the New Testament originally said. We're just playing with little details. And so when I debated Dr. Ehrman on this subject, I asked him, can you show us any place in the New Testament where you do not believe that we continue to have the original readings? He pointed us to one word in 2 Peter, as I recall, that had absolutely no meaning as to doctrine or anything like that. So the reality is, I think in that debate with Dr. Ehrman, he said that the New Testament is by far the earliest attested work of all of antiquity. And he's right about that. So doesn't matter whether we're talking Byzantine manuscripts or Alexandrian manuscripts, that nomenclature actually has now been pretty much debunked by CBGM. But it doesn't matter which manuscripts we're using. If you use the Textus Receptus or you use the Nestle-Aland text, same gospel, same teaching, same message that we're delivering this evening.
Okay,